Howdy, I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council coming at you with tonight's City Council recap. I've got a couple of big themes to talk about. First is the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee update that we listened to. And the second is subject of eminent domain, which has come up a lot lately. But first, we had some comic relief tonight. Carlos Rodriguez, whom you might remember is the former communications director for failed Texas House candidate Lorenzo Sanchez, made an appearance in the comments of public interest. He called for my resignation back in January with a ridiculously strung together series of quotes. He came back with a bunch of new strung together quotes and a new narrative calling for somebody's head. That was worth a laugh. Next is the actual Comprehensive Plan Review Committee update. So we commissioned the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee in December of 2019. It's a while back. We had hoped and anticipated that it might take about a year or up to a year to create a new comprehensive plan. The pandemic was only partially responsible for an extended timeline in that. Earlier this year, Chairman Doug Shockey suggested that the committee break into a subcommittee, and 4 specific people were chosen to create a working group in a subcommittee to come to a consensus. And that took a lot of time, a couple of months, through regular meetings of that subcommittee. That's Dr. Yoram Solomon, Sal Lamastra, Jim Dillevu, and Hilton Kong worked together. And they have come to pretty much a consensus. There are a couple of things that have been tweaked at the last CPRC meeting, and they're going to have another meeting tomorrow night where there is some significant pressure for them to take a final vote and just be done with it once and for all. Now, if they're just not getting anywhere and they're spinning their wheels, I could understand actually not moving forward and just having a vote and being done with it one way or the other. But if they're at the 1 yard line or even the 5 yard line and they just need to iron out a couple more details, I disagree with the notion that they should just take a vote and be done with it. If there's truly light at the end of the tunnel and they're almost there. But I'm 1 vote on council and I'm not any votes on the CPRC. So the CPRC meeting is going to be tomorrow night, which by the time you view this may be tonight, Tuesday, April 20-something, whatever the Tuesday is before the May 1st general election or May 1st election. So that Tuesday, which might be tonight. So I encourage everybody to tune in. It'll be broadcast live on Plano TV and on Facebook, the City of Plano's Facebook page. Now, it's important to point out that there were 11 criteria to form this agreement amongst the subcommittee. And it's estimated that the subcommittee modified 30-some-odd% of the total comprehensive plan. They also suggested changes to the zoning process, which staff doesn't need to wait for the new comprehensive plan to pass. They've already started implementing changes to transparency and accessibility and ease of understanding zoning, which came out of the committees and the subcommittees' work. And one of the things that we're doing is making sure that we seek feedback intentionally, not haphazardly and not, oh, by the way, but intentionally seeking feedback from residents, not just on the comprehensive plan, of course, but on regular zoning. And we have to date spent about 2/3 of the budget we had allocated for all of this, but we've got possibly a few more months to go. Of course, the CPRC is going to meet tomorrow night. Whatever comes of that, then out of that, it has to go to planning and zoning for feedback and weigh in, and assuming it passes planning and zoning in the CPRC, which, by the way, the CPRC has a 75% voting threshold for approval. So we deliberately set a high bar. But then it's got to go out for public review. Now, it's important to note that this is not a discovery process. We're not seeing what the public would like in a comprehensive plan. We've heard it over the past several years. This is a period of appropriate review for the public to understand it, digest, weigh in with significant concerns or positive feedback before this goes in front of council. But it's not to go back to the drawing board with every suggestion somebody has. That being said, we always want to solicit suggestions, input, and feedback from our citizens. And then ultimately it's going to come before council. That could be as late as September, it was estimated tonight. But this is a momentous thing for the city after the past several years of turmoil, after the passage of the Plano Tomorrow plan. What I have always desired with this new process and this new plan is a comprehensive plan that not just the bare majority and not every last person, that's unrealistic, but the overwhelming majority of our people can get behind. And that's what I believe we will have in the offing, but stay tuned for more. The next theme that we really touched on was eminent domain. Now, of course, this has been a frequent subject of late, but most law truly is reactive. Something happens and lawmakers say, oh, something should be done about that. But the way we go about it should be very deliberate and thoughtful. We shouldn't react by passing things just as a feel-good response to something that happens or an initiative. But we should address things. So Councilwoman Lily Bow and Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Anthony Ricciardelli brought the proposal for an ordinance to require a supermajority of council to approve any eminent domain case. That unfortunately failed 4-4, and so it did not move forward for further exploration. And the second thing that came up was a consent agenda item that I had requested be pulled out for individual consideration. This was agenda item N, as in November, I believe. And the case was to approve DART's use of eminent domain to acquire the land, if need be, for a station, property that they need for the station, a station for the Silver Line. Now, this came up a month or two ago in a related matter on a different piece of property. DART's process is to seek approval. Under state law, DART has eminent domain authority, but it has to get the approval of the city where the property exists before it can move forward on that eminent domain. So DART's process, their policy, is to seek pre-approval to use eminent domain before they ever engage in negotiations with the property owner for the sale of that land. Now, as I said tonight during the meeting, if you already have pre-approval for eminent domain, that changes the nature of negotiations before negotiations even begin, however good the intentions are. If it's there and able to be used, then that just changes the nature of negotiations, because that provides a disincentive to negotiate on the part of the person who might have the ability to exercise eminent domain. So I proposed to table this item. I moved to table this item until negotiations have taken place. Maybe they'll take place, maybe they'll be fine, and eminent domain will never need to go forward. And if that is the case, then it never comes back to council. It's withdrawn. It's taken care of. If they come to an impasse and they cannot negotiate, then it will come back before council and we'll then consider it on its merit. But I'm happy to say that tabling motion passed 5-3. So a couple other themes we discussed. One was property standards. We had a presentation in preliminary open meeting, and property standards make sure that our city is vibrant and attractive and is well kept. What surprised me, and I learned about this a couple of weeks ago before it came out in the meeting tonight, is that some 75%, 3/4 of all of our notices for property standards violations are proactive. There's been some confusion about whether our property standards notices are reactive, meaning they're complaint driven. We wait until somebody complains about something. So I proposed, but it looks like most of them are proactive. That's not a specific ratio that we're seeking. That's just the way it falls out. But there is quite a bit of proactive inspection going on. So I asked tonight to explore a couple of pilots, just pick a couple parts of the city and increase the effort for awareness and outreach so that homeowners know the property standards they're expected to upkeep, actually all property owners, and what people can do to report violations that they believe are happening. Increase that effort while decreasing the amount of proactive inspection, and see if we notice a difference in the total amount of notices. I believe it would be better if we can to increase awareness and outreach and decrease proactive inspection if we can still achieve the same result. And as I pointed out in the meeting, on one hand, we have just don't inspect anything unless people complain about it, because the supposition is that if nobody's complaining about it, then nobody has a problem. But counterbalancing that is the reality that a lot of people may not even realize that they can make a complaint, or that they have grounds to complain, or whom to complain to. So I want to make sure we're trying to strike an appropriate balance. Another item that I asked to be pulled off of the consent agenda for individual consideration is the bond, a big bond, over $40 million for the drainage culvert at Cullen Creek. So first, let me address that this falls under the realm of infrastructure, and I do believe is an appropriate responsibility for the city, not private landowners, not private property owners, but for the city as part of the necessary infrastructure. But this is a huge project, so issuing over $40 million of bonds for this construction is significant, and it's proposed, it's going to be paid for through drainage rates over the next 40 years. The bonds have a 40-year repayment period, which is pretty extraordinary. So what should govern the lifespan of a bond? Basically, it's the asset life. So put it like this: if you purchase a car and you get a car loan, and you're expected to keep that car for maybe 5 years, you can get a 5-year loan. But are you going to get a 10-year loan for a car you're only going to keep 5 years? The answer is pretty obviously no. You're going to keep paying for something after you've sold it or otherwise disposed of it. So I asked a simple question: what is the expected lifespan, asset life of the drainage culvert? And we were told roughly 50 years. So a 40-year bond for an asset that's expected to last about 50 years makes sense, but it's still a huge price tag. That was approved. We had some additional zoning cases. Some involved granting a specific use permit, an SUP, to DART to operate a transit center for future Silver Line stations and a future Red Line station. And then there was an additional zoning case that changed the zoning from retail to light industrial 1. This was on a half-acre piece of land. And looking at the maps, there were some citizen concerns about increasing industrial use in the area. However, it's consistent with the rest of the parcel that the property owner owns, and it's a tiny, relatively tiny portion of the existing parcel to bring it all under the same zoning category. And it did not significantly impact the zoning in the entire area at all. So that's it for tonight's recap. I look forward to more comments from Carlos Rodriguez at the next meeting, trying to put somebody else's head on a pike. I'm Shelby Williams from Plano City Council. Good night and God bless.